This is going to be the best red beans and rice you've ever had. It's a Southern staple, but most folks are missing two small ingredients that make a big difference. For faster cooking, less gas in the creamier pot, baking soda is the key. And those celery leaves you always throw away, we are using them. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is soak my beans. Now I've got my beans on a plate, and I put them on a plate because I wanted to sort them out and make sure there weren't any little rocks or any bugs in here before I start to soak them. So I've got about 8 cups of water here that I'm going to use to soak the beans in. But before I soak the beans, I'm going to put in some kosher salt. I'm going to put in about 3 tablespoons of kosher salt. And the reason I'm putting in salt is it's going to help with flavoring and softening the beans. And to further help that, I'm going to add in a teaspoon of baking soda. And this is going to be like the real thing that actually helps with making the beans cook a little bit faster. But the baking soda is also going to help to degass as well. So I'm going to let this sit for about 4 hours. I'm going to cover it, just put it in the refrigerator, let it soak for about 4 hours. 4 hours is really all this needs. You can soak it up to 8 hours if you got to go to work or something, but 4 hours is really all you're going to need for this. So I'm going to let this soak, and then we're going to come back and then get started on the next steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut and dice the veggies. So I've got a red bell pepper, I've got 1 onion, and I've got some celery. And I've got some organic celery. I buy the organic kind because for this recipe, I'm going to be using the leaves. And the leaves on the regular store-bought ones, you don't have as many and they're not as green. I'm going to start off by cutting my bell pepper. So I'm going to set that to the side, and now I'm going to dice my onion. And I'm just using 1 yellow onion, but you can use a white onion. It really doesn't matter which one you use. So I'm going to take the onion, and then I'm just going to give it a dice. And when you get towards the end, you just turn it on the flat side again and just make more cuts like that. That way you can use more of the onion. And you don't cut all the way down to the end because I leave this on here so that it doesn't fall apart. And now I'm just gonna get 2 ribs of the celery. Okay, so I've got my celery, my onion, and my bell pepper. So I've got those ready to go. So I'm just gonna add some oil, just a little bit. I don't need too much. I'm just gonna put all my veggies in here. I'm just gonna let them cook down. I always wonder why you have to saute veggies before you add them to a super stew. And I was thinking like it really wouldn't make much of a difference in the taste, but it kind of does. Like when you saute them, it sweetens them and mutes them a little more than if you were to add them straight into the liquid. Doing this will caramelize them a little bit and give them a little bit sweeter taste. And it seems to bring out some of the flavors a little bit more and mute some flavors a little bit more. Now you see these celery leaves. These leaves do not look like the leaves that you would get when you buy a regular celery stalk from the store. These leaves are much darker in color, they're bigger, and they have a stronger celery flavor. So I'm going to chop these up, and then I'm going to go ahead and get started with adding the rest of the mix. So I'm going to get started by adding in my seasonings. I've got a tablespoon of salt, regular table salt. I'm going to add in 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of thyme. I'm going to be adding in a ½ teaspoon of cayenne for a little bit of heat. I'm just going to give that a stir. And as it cooks, you can smell the seasonings, they're blooming. It smells really good already. So now I'm going to add in some water. So I've got 6 cups of water that I'm going to add. Then I've got my beans that I've soaked, rinsed, and drained. I've got my celery leaves that I'm adding in. Just give that a stir. And then I'm preheating my oven to 350 because I'm going to cook this in the oven instead of cooking it over the stove. And that's going to help cook it faster. But there's one other thing that I'm going to do that's going to help this cook faster. So I'm going to add in a ½ teaspoon of baking soda. And this is gonna help the beans become creamier. It's gonna help them cook faster. And so we don't wanna add too much, because if we add too much baking soda, it can start to taste a little soapy. So 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon is about where you want to be. And then there's one more thing I'm adding. I'm adding in 1 ham hock. And you don't have to add a ham hock if you don't want to. If you're vegetarian, you can skip the ham hock. Or vegan, you can skip the ham hock. I'm adding it just for the flavor. I'm actually not going to end up cutting this up, because the higher heat in the oven at 350 is going to make this not as tender, so it's not going to be as easy to shred. It's not going to be as tender. So I'm really just adding this for the flavor. But there is another meat that I'm going to be adding at the end. I'm going to cover this and put this in the oven, and I'm just going to cook it until the beans are nice and tender and we see a gravy start to form. Right now I've got the beans in the oven, and they've been in there for about 1.5 hours, and they're done. The baking soda really helped them to cook a lot faster than they would have without it. But I need to let the liquid reduce down some. And then it'll start to look like it's got a little gravy to it, which is how I like for it to look. So that'll be in like another 1/2 hour, 45 minutes or so. But what I could do is I could actually just mash down some of those beans and then mix it in, and that'll give the exact look that I'm looking for. I don't want to do that. I usually don't. But if I feel like I'm running out of time and I have to do that, then I will. So we'll see where we're at with that. But right now, I'm going to take my andouille sausage and I'm going to just slice it up, and then I'm just going to give it a little char in this pan, just to give it a little browning. Now, I'm not going to put any oil in it because it really doesn't need it. But what I usually do with the andouille sausage is I put it in at the end. Some people like to put it in the beginning, and they'll brown it and add it in at the start. I don't like to do that, because what I found when I've done it is that the sausage just kind of gets mushy by the time that it's done cooking. It just cooks in that liquid just way too long, and it starts to get a little mushy. So for the meat flavor, I prefer to just use a ham hock for the meat flavor. And when I'm using the ham hock and I'm cooking in the oven at 350, I don't typically keep it to like shred up and eat like you would with some greens. I don't, because it just kind of just gets too tough. That's one of those things that you need to cook over a longer period of time, low and slow, and it'll be a lot tender and easier to shred. When it's cooked at a higher heat, it just gets tough, and you kind of just have to like try to chop it up, and it's not really that pleasant to eat. So for me, it's just for flavor, and when it's done, I just toss it. I'm just gonna put these in this pan, and I'm gonna let them cook for a little bit. So let's see where we are with these. Yep, this is about what I'm looking for right here. Just get them nice and brown. I didn't even need any oil for that. That's why I didn't add it. This has got enough fat in it where you don't need to add any oil. I'm just gonna get it brown on both sides, and once the other side is brown, I'm gonna set it aside and add it in to the beans at the very end. This is exactly how I wanted them to end up. So now I'm going to add the sausage into it, then I'm going to add my rice. You can see how that has mashed so easily. So there's one other thing I forgot to tell you, is I added 2 bay leaves. I didn't mention that earlier, but I put it in the oven and I forgot. I was like, oh man, I forgot to add my bay leaves. So I added 2 bay leaves as it was cooking. So I'm actually going to take those bay leaves out. Just set it right here, actually. So now that my beans are done, I'm just gonna add my sausage to them, the sausage that I cooked earlier. So I've got my bowl. I've got my bowl with my rice in it. Now just push it off to the side. I'm gonna add in, ladle in the red beans. Try to have a decent looking presentation. I'm gonna add some little sliced green onions to that. So this is what it's looking like in the bowl after I played it. It looks amazing. You know I'm gonna have to take some pictures of this before I take a bite into it. The beans came out absolutely perfect. Nice, creamy, and delicious. I would definitely recommend you trying this. I'm gonna make sure I put the recipe in the captions and in the description for you, so you know exactly what I put in there. Now I want you to try it, and I want you to let me know how it turned out for you. This is absolutely amazing. This is probably gonna be the best red beans and rice recipe you've ever tried.